paying for that? That is the question. That is the that should everybody know. You know, there are a few 100,000 left in the fund of the McCann supporters. I can't remember what it's called now. But, you know, should they have to pay it themselves?
What was the case about?
Well, they tried to say that a detective called Goncalo Amaral had defamed them, but the court yesterday decided finally that they were not defamed by the actions of the detective, but they were put there because they were made suspects. And anybody who you can ask about this, you know, I spoke to a man today, a friend of mine, Sir Benjamin Slade, who always rings me up and asks me about any of these things to do with McCann, because he's got a great interest in it. They were made suspects, so they're still suspects to this day. So it wasn't the fault of the detective that they were a suspect. So suing him was a very bad idea. And at one point they did win 400,000, I think, euro in damages, but then he won against them the next time round. But they've got 3 months to appeal, so they might use more of the public money. But I think what's disgraceful is £14 million of public money, of British public money, has been wasted on this investigation. The Operation Grange, if you look at their website this very morning, as I did, it says the Operation Grange continues. What about all the other missing people? What about, you know, the poor mother of Ben Needham, the boy who went missing in Greece, who gets next to nothing in help? You know, my friend went missing, and we kindly talked about it on your channel. They found him. You know, other people thousands of people go missing, and nobody gets 14 million other than McCann. And I find that very curious.
Well, isn't it par for the course in a criminal investigation when a child goes missing that the parents are suspected, just like in, you know, when women get murdered, often the partner is suspected?
Yes, but equally, in this case, we should remember it should not be a British investigation. It should be a Portuguese investigation. The child went missing in Portugal. And then we've got the matter of, sorry, my stupid computer is making noise here. We've got the matter of also Christian Brockner, who is the German suspect, and he's not been charged.
Tell the viewers a little bit about Christian.
So Mr. Brockner is a very evil man, without a doubt. He has been convicted of raping people, but most of his victims are older. Some of his victims are younger, but the majority of victims are elderly women, well, middle-aged to elderly women, as opposed to 3-year-old children. And the German police have been pursuing this man and saying he's a suspect, but even they are coming towards the conclusion that they haven't got a reason to charge him yet. And the gentleman we met at the crime conference, what is his name? You'll know his name. The double-barrel policeman.
Mark Williams Thomas.
Mark Williams Thomas. He went to Portugal with a view to trying to make a program saying Christian Brockner was the kind of person to do this. And he came to the conclusion that he couldn't find any evidence. So many people have been going down this avenue of Christian Brockner. They've examined buildings, they've examined vehicles, but they haven't found anything. It's yet another red herring in the case. Look, if you've got £14 million of money sloshing around, and then on top of that, you've got all the private money that was put into this. People like Philip Green offered $1 million, Richard Branson, the Sun newspaper. Somebody would have traded in the perpetrator.
It looks like with
a wonky eye. It's got a strange eye condition. This child is easily identifiable if it were still alive. And those cadaver dogs sensed death in the cupboard of that house. Now, whatever happened that night, whoever knows. We don't know. I don't make any theories about it, because you can't make a theory about something when you weren't present. I'm not the oracle, so I can't say what happened. But I have met Mr. and Mrs. McCann. Um, didn't particularly like them, but that doesn't mean that they're guilty. But equally, I do think they were appalling to leave their children unattended when they could have paid for childcare, and they could have easily have done that. They were doctors, and it's not as if they couldn't afford it.
So Matthew, I know you don't subscribe to conspiracy theories, but what do you think about this theory that the kid was given some kind of sedative and actually died, and the body was disposed of?
Well, I don't know. I don't know, but I've read many of those theories. I've equally come across many things on that level, which suggests, that obviously there was the scent of death in the cupboard in the apartment. There was the scent of death in the car, the cadaver dogs. Lots of things that don't make sense. And if you read my articles, I always put a few questions at the end, and I say questions without answers. And I urge people to read those, and they can make their own judgments.
All right, so I'm going to ask the viewers then if they've got any questions for you. We've got one coming already. Ash has said, if you've got any fans or anything in the room, to turn them off. Matthew, he's getting a bit of feedback.
Fans in the room, no.
Okay, let me turn this down. All right, so have they faced charges for neglect?
No.
And do you think they were neglectful?
Under British law, they would have been, yes.
Under British law?
Left their children unattended. But many people I know would say, we leave our children, they're not far away. But in this case, if you look at the map of where the house is, the apartment goes straight onto the street, public high street. The place where they were having their tapas and their food, was not visible. Okay, they all went and checked periodically the Tapas 7, and they're called the Tapas 7, this group, the friends, and the other parents left their children unattended as well. So, they weren't alone in doing this. But it's it's not the way that you would expect normal people who could afford childcare to behave, and especially to leave the door open. Unlocked.
So, one question is coming for you, Matthew. What evidence do you cite to absolve the McCanns of guilt?
I don't absolve them of guilt.
Well, that was answered.
I can't say they're guilty or not guilty because there's never been a body found. So that's not for me to answer, is it? Really?
Can you see that question on the screen?
No, I can see you on. I can see half a question, but right. Are we likely to ever get closure? Right. I think highly unlikely. I think that this child, the body must have been put somewhere very far away where it will never be found. There were lots of building sites in that area. The concrete could have gone over the next day. All sorts of things could have happened. Because with this level of money involved and this level of people involved, so, the McCanns had parties in Downing Street. Peter Mandelson got involved. They went for vodka and risotto with Clement Freud. Lots of very powerful people supported them. The Branson and Philip Green and this double glazing tycoon from the north of England. They had big supporters. So if this were to be solved, it would have been solved already. It doesn't make sense that this goes on and on. And, I came into contact with them through a lady called Lady Catherine Mayer, Lady Mayer was her name. She was married to a man called Sir Christopher Mayer. He was British ambassador to Washington. He died a few weeks ago. and she ran a charity to do with abducted children. And that's how I was introduced to them. And I immediately took a dislike to them. I found them very aggressive, particularly him. I found her a bit strange, but I didn't like his temper. He was a very rude man. And I thought that was my only observation of him. But that doesn't make him anything other than a very rude man.
Let's see if there's still any feedback. Do you have a headset by any chance, Matthew?
Do I have a headset?
Yeah.
You have some speakers. If I could go in, do you want me to?
Yeah, go and grab them because there's still a little bit of feedback. And we are going to be bringing in Mitchell early, I think, while we continue with Matthew. Let me just, because I can still hear the feedback on myself there. This should be better. Right, so now, Matthew, you've got to change your audio. Yes, there we go. Let's hear you, Matthew.
Hello.
Yep, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yes.
Oh, that's perfect. You have fixed the problem of the feedback. That's great.
Course.
I really appreciate that. All right, so the next question that's come in from the Desolate One. What about the questions they refuse to answer? Shaun, could you ask if it's being posed to the McCanns again? Great show.
They haven't been posed to them again because they haven't been back to Portugal, as far as I'm aware. They left Portugal because they didn't want to answer the questions.
Mark Wilson wants to know why they could not afford babysitters if they were wealthy doctors.
Well, that's a question you'd have to ask them, but I find it very odd that they chose not to do that. But the whole group, the whole Tapas 7, they all had the same mentality. So it was obviously a thing of that group of people that they didn't feel the need to pay for childcare, but they did pay for childcare during the day on occasions, which I find quite odd. So why would you pay at night?
Do you believe the couple who went on holiday with the McCanns?
Well, there were 7 people, so I don't know which couple you mean.
Did all of the 7 people just give them the alibi of, it was an accident kind of
there
thing?
were many. Well, they didn't say it was an accident. They didn't know what happened. They all had different stories, but the main one is a lady called Jane Tanner, and she's the one that most people like to ask about because she changed her story a number of times.
Jenny wants to know why did the twins not get taken? Just Madeleine.
I have utterly no idea. I couldn't answer that, but it seems very odd, doesn't it? Yes.
Karen wants to know, is it true there was childcare available on the site?
It was a Mark Warner resort, and yes, childcare was available there.
Next question. Do you believe that she was abducted? That's from Truth.
I personally believe that the evidence points to something happening in the cupboard.
In the cupboard? Could you expand on that?
The Cadaver dogs sent death in the cupboard. And the Cadaver dogs haven't been proven to lie in the past. So I do think there is evidence that the poor child, something happened to it in that apartment. And the fact that there's never been a body found or a child found, there are these ridiculous sightings. Like people say, oh, they heard a child speaking German with a strange eye in a supermarket, but they never cite a source. I do think that sadly poor Madeleine died in that apartment by whatever means happened, but I don't know. I can't prove it. And, the child could still be alive. It is entirely possible that the child was abducted and taken away. It's entirely possible that it died in that apartment, but I think the likelihood is the Cadaver dogs are not lying. And that's what Mr. Amaral, seems to think. And he continues to maintain what he says about it in his book. And I hope that his book is now published in Britain.
Gary Denton has asked, will they be brought in to answer questions with the police again?
With the Portuguese police or the British police? Or the German police?
Let's talk about both.
Well, there's all three. So the British police cooperate with them through Operation Grange. They support them, and that's funded by repeated Home Secretaries, Theresa May being one of them in the past, more recently Priti Patel. The Portuguese police are not particularly happy with them because they don't cooperate with them. And the German police seem to have this thing about this Brockner, but they're not getting very far with it. So I don't see any likelihood of Mr. and Mrs. McCann being questioned about anything again in the near future.
The Desolate One has sent a question for me. Shaun, do you feel that the McCanns are guilty of illegal reasons you are not allowed to say? So I don't know. I'm an observer of all the different theories. We've interviewed everybody from David I to Mark Williams, Thomas, and a range of views in between. We've tried to absorb as much information as possible on this case. So at the least, I think there was negligence in just leaving the kids in that room and going over and having that meal. I think that security protocol should have been tighter. They should have contracted some kind of adult babysitter from the facility, or there should have been, more supervision and adults watching what was going on. So I think at a very minimum, and now if they're not guilty, to have that happen is the most heinous thing that could ever happen in a parent's life. So, our hearts go out to them for the nightmare, they must have dealt with. So next question for you, Matthew, is from Nick. Do you think that she could have been, I'm not going to say that word because the algorithm doesn't like it. We use the word transported. We use the word transported. Yeah.
No, I think that's highly unlikely. I think, if this child had gone somewhere, then somebody would have interacted with the person that took that child. There's even one photograph of a woman who looks like a certain person we can't mention, whose initials are G M, and the woman really does look like her. And somebody who came into interaction with somebody who did that would have traded them in, because the rewards involved are into the millions of pounds. When there's the rewards, someone's always going to snitch. You know this. You've been through the prison system. You've encountered people who've no doubt probably been, they think that they're loyal to people until there's something put on the table which gets them out of their own situation. And I know people like that, as you know, and we've talked about it in the past. Somebody would have traded in somebody if that child were there, because that child has a very distinctive eye. You can't hide its eye. It can't, you can color its hair black or brown or red or whatever you want to do, but you can't change its eye. That child would have been found by now if it was still alive. I do believe.
Fred wants to know, why weren't they charged with neglect by the Portuguese?
Because they left Portugal. They said they were being pursued. And the Sun ran a headline to that effect.
Kat wants to know, why do you think the British government put so much money into this one case?
Well, I think we've talked about this before. It was a case that came about at a very key period. So every 10 or 15 years, there is a case. So the case before was Jamie Bulger, the poor child in Liverpool who was taken by those dreadful boys who beat him to death on a rail track. And, that was a case that shocked the nation. And in key political periods, you have a case like this, and it's a good thing for a government to use. So this was at the period of the end of Tony Blair's government in May 2007, before Gordon Brown came in. And this was a case that captured the mood of the nation. And I was in California at the time. I remember being there, and it came up on the news all the time there. And the other big case was the one of that awful man that killed his wife and drowned her in the bay and killed the unborn child. And it was they were both at the same time. I remember it very, very well. And Tony Blair and Gordon Brown both was involved. And then, of course, later David Cameron came to be involved in this. Once you get key actors of state involved in a case, you can't have these people accused of anything, because it would reflect badly on them. So it's become one of those stories where there's so many powerful people involved that no one would dare come up with an alternative narrative, I suppose. Now, I cannot say what happened, and I really don't know. And I've met Mr. and Mrs. McCann, and if they are totally innocent, other than of leaving the door open, it's a terrible thing for them. But equally, if this is one giant cover-up, and you do have many people who believe in things like this, whereas I less so believe in that. That's an equal terrible thing. But something here doesn't make sense, and what makes no sense at all, and Sir Benjamin Slade said it to me this afternoon when I was on the phone to him, was, why 14 million for that one child? Why not 14 million for every child? Why does this one case get continual reallocation of Metropolitan Police money? I think it's an outrage.
Next question is from MacB. Has proof of life been shown before the alleged date of kidnapping?
Well, there were plenty of photographs of the child with other members of the group, from the plane to the swimming pool. Yes, so I don't think you can say the child was in that resort, yes.
Just want to give a huge shout out then to people watching the stream across all the platforms right now. We're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. We've got almost 2,000 people watching. So just want to shout out, thank you for all your questions. They're flying in so fast. Some of them, we're losing them because there's so many of them, but we are trying to get through them. And please, like and subscribe.
What I would say is, when I wrote about this yesterday, I had about 15,000 people write to me from Facebook. Facebook is the thing. The difference between this case and other cases is, because I think the people who are interested are a little older, they're mostly on Facebook, and there are so many groups on Facebook dedicated to the Madeleine Mccann case, and lots of expats, because obviously a lot of British people live in Portugal.
The stoned alien wants to know, what could make the British government do an investigation?
Well, the British government have funded the Metropolitan Police Operation Grange into this, but that's what they do.
Crazy Bunny wants to know, why did Robert Murat fly out so quickly?
Well, I don't know that much about Mr. Murat, but Mr. Murat has been completely exonerated, and I don't think it's fair to talk about him.
Why, after all these years, are the McCanns still being brought up on the radio? They really tried to discredit the Portuguese police. What's going on?
They are very able at connecting with people of power. So they've had friends in every government since their child disappeared, or whatever you would like to describe it as. So they knew Blair, they knew Brown, they knew David Cameron, they knew Theresa May. they have been very able at keeping their story alive. Now, you could say that's an amazing thing, but I just think it's disproportionate that they've been able to do that. As regards the book, I don't like the book. I refused to buy the book. I went and looked at it in Waterstones in King's Road in London when it came out. And I just thought, what a strange book that she talked